My name is Elon, and until that night I thought I had seen it all. Technology, science, artificial intelligence, space travel. Nothing seemed to surprise me anymore. I was always driven by logic, data, and real possibilities. But what happened on March 9th, 2025 is beyond any equation I know. I was alone in my room in Austin, Texas. It wasn't a special night, nothing out of the ordinary. I had just hung up the phone after a call with a team from SpaceX. I was tired but not exhausted. My mind was still racing as usual. That's when I felt a strange weight on my chest, as if something was pulling me out of myself. It wasn't pain. It was a calling, as if something was about to happen, something big. I sat up on the bed, closed my eyes for a second, and that's when everything began to change. The room grew too silent. Even the sound of the electronics disappeared. And then, everything went dark. I don't remember fainting. There was no fall. I simply ceased to be there. When I opened my eyes, or whatever that was, I was in a place that was not Earth. But it wasn't heaven either, at least not as I imagined it. There was a feeling of suspension, as if time had frozen and everything was on hold. And in the middle of that place without a place, I heard a voice. But it wasn't like hearing with my ears. It was directly inside my consciousness. It was firm, clear, impossible to ignore. This voice said to me, "Pay attention, because what I'm about to show you needs to be told to the world." From that moment on, I was carried, not walking, but as if my soul were being transported, until I reached Jerusalem. Not physical Jerusalem, but a spiritual Jerusalem. I could see the city as if it were alive, pulsating with light and history. I had never been very religious, but in that moment I understood that that city was more than just a geographical location. It was the epicenter of something much greater. And the voice continued, saying that a great upheaval was about to occur there, something that would shake all nations. It was as if I had access to a dimension of reality that had always been there, but that my human eyes had never been able to see. The stone buildings, the narrow streets, the millennial walls, everything shone with a kind of ancient energy, as if the city itself were awake. But at the same time, I felt an absurd tension hanging over it, like a magnetic field about to break. The voice then told me, "The world is not paying attention, but the spiritual clock is about to strike a decisive hour." I felt something approaching, a presence, like an invisible wave, about to hit the entire earth. The city seemed to breathe faster, as if it knew what was coming. I saw crowds, protests, tears, but I also saw hope, like a flame that refused to be extinguished. And the voice assured me, "Even when everything trembles, my hand will not withdraw." Those words were engraved in me as if they had been carved into my soul. And then, out of nowhere, I was taken to another place. Suddenly I was flying over Canada. The contrast was enormous. Instead of intense light, there was a dense, heavy, almost oppressive mist. I saw streets covered in ice, people walking with their heads down, faces set in determination. There was an air of confusion, as if everyone were lost within their own mind. The voice returned, but this time it sounded deeper. "A time of friction is coming here. Nothing will be quick, but in the midst of darkness I will raise someone." And at that moment, I saw the image of a man. He wasn't a politician. He didn't seem to have any power. He was simple, yet his presence radiated a strange, silent, almost supernatural strength. He walked among the people with firm steps and a serene expression. The voice told me, "This one will bring order where there is disorder, peace where chaos reigns." And I understood. What was happening was not just about Jerusalem. It was something global. Each nation was part of a plan that surpassed any human understanding. And I, a man of science and logic, was there, unable to deny a single word of what I was experiencing. The next scene hit me with such strong emotional impact that I needed time, even there, outside of time, to absorb it. I was taken to Israel. But unlike Jerusalem, this vision was more personal. I saw faces, families, children running through the streets, men praying fervently, women crying silently. And along with those images, I felt a weight, as if each one of those people were carrying an ancestral pain, something that had been accumulating for centuries. The voice said, "They waited, they cried out," and I heard them. Then I saw invisible hands touching those tired hearts. It was as if God were stitching wounds with threads of light. The sensation was so intimate, so profound, that I wept. It wasn't pity. It was a recognition of something sacred happening there. The pain that once seemed like injustice transformed into a promise. The voice then added, "I am restoring, not only the land, but the hearts." At that moment, something inside me broke and at the same time was rebuilt, as if my own skepticism had been undone by the simplicity of that love. The strangest part is that all of this didn't seem like a dream. It was more real than any reality I had ever experienced. There was no confusion. There was clarity, as if all the noises of existence had been silenced, so that, for the first time, I could hear clearly. And then came the final part, and perhaps the heaviest. The voice said that all of this was a calling, not just a vision, that I should share it, that it was not meant to be kept secret, that this message was for everyone. Do not fear, prepare, pray, wait. These words echoed inside me like hammers on metal. I felt that this was not just a warning, but a summons, as if we were on the threshold of something that no one is really prepared to face. But at the same time, I felt a peace that anchored me. It wasn't a human peace. It was something that filled the chest and dissolved the fear, as if to say, even if everything crumbles, I am still here. And then, suddenly, I felt as if I were being pulled back. The return was violent. Not in pain, but in contrast. It was like emerging from a sacred silence only to fall into a room full of disjointed noises. When I opened my eyes, the white ceiling of my room looked strange, as if I were seeing the world for the first time. The cell phone was blinking next to the bed with dozens of accumulated notifications, but I couldn't care less. My body was drenched in sweat, my heart racing, and a feeling of weight still pressed on my chest. Not physical, but spiritual. I lay there for a while, trying to understand if what I had experienced had been a dream, a hallucination, or something beyond. But I knew, with a certainty I had never had before, that it was real. It wasn't imagination. It was more real than the world around me. When I got up and went to the mirror, I saw something different in my eyes. They were darker, as if they carried a memory that wasn't solely mine. I took a deep breath, sat on the bed, and understood. I had a decision to make. Either I kept it all to myself, or I obeyed the calling. In the following days, I tried to rationalize everything. I spoke with doctors, had tests done, and talked with people close to me. No diagnosis, no explanation. They told me that perhaps it was stress, that my body had collapsed from overwork, but I knew it wasn't that. The sensation that remained was different from any crisis, breakdown, or imbalance. It was a mission. I knew I had to tell someone. But how could someone like me, known for being pragmatic, rational, almost skeptical, how was I going to tell the world that I heard the voice of God, that I saw Jerusalem alive and pulsating in spirit, that I saw the future of nations being revealed like chapters of an eternal book? I tried to write, I tried to record, but every time I started, I felt overwhelmed by responsibility. Until I understood, I didn't need to convince anyone. I just needed to tell it, and whoever had ears would understand. That's when I decided to speak out. Not for fame, not for debate, but because if I remained silent, that fire inside me would consume me from within. The first time I mentioned it publicly was in an informal interview, where I was asked something completely random about the future of humanity. I took a deep breath and, for the first time, spoke directly. I believe we are about to enter a period of spiritual transition. Something big is going to happen. It starts with Jerusalem. It was like dropping a bomb. The looks froze. The interviewer tried to laugh, thinking I was joking, but soon realized I was serious. The video went viral. Some called me a visionary. Others called me crazy. Some even said I was experiencing a mental breakdown, but no one remained indifferent, and that gave me the courage to continue. I began to write down what I had seen, in detail. I created private records. I sent them to trusted people. And, little by little, even unwillingly, I became known as the guy of the prophecy, an uncomfortable position for someone like me, who had always relied on data and numbers. But this experience forced me to accept that there are things greater than any equation. The strangest part of all is that, even after telling my story, the experience continued to live inside of me. It wasn't like an ordinary memory. It was like a constant echo, as if that voice were still guiding me. I began to dream of places I had never visited, but which, upon researching, I discovered did exist. I started to feel specific pains before important political events. It was as if my body had become a kind of spiritual antenna, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was afraid I was losing my sanity. I spoke with spiritual leaders, with rabbis, with pastors, even with monks. Most looked at me with caution, but there were those who said, "You have received something that many spend their entire lives asking for and never hear." Those words touched me, because as insane as it all may seem, I know I'm not making it up. I saw, I heard, and I know that this upheaval is coming. Perhaps not as people expect, perhaps not with war, but with revelation. And that, in itself, already changes everything. Today, months after that night, I continue trying to find a balance between what I experienced and the world I return to. I haven't ceased to be who I am. I still love science, technology, exploring the limits of what is possible. But now I know that there is something that goes beyond all that, something that isn't measured by instruments nor tested in a laboratory. It is a reality that pulses parallel to ours, waiting to be perceived by those who have the courage to listen. And as strange as it may seem, everything I once thought was irrational now seems truer than any formula. The feeling of that peace, that presence, that certainty is something that accompanies me every day. And even if people doubt, even if they think it's exaggerated, I know what I experienced. And I don't speak to convince anyone. I only speak because I know there are more people feeling the same. People who feel that something is changing in the air, that the world is trembling inside, and they don't know why. This message is for those people. Do not be afraid. Do not get lost in the noise. Pay attention. Something is coming, and it is bigger than any of us can imagine. I end this account without ready-made answers, but with a faith I've never had before. Not faith in religion, nor in dogmas, but faith in a God who speaks, who acts, who is writing something right now, while we live each day without realizing what is forming behind the scenes of reality. I believe that 2025 will be a watershed year, not only because of external events, but because of an inner awakening. The upheaval that will occur in Jerusalem, in Canada, in Israel, and in so many other places has already begun, and it begins within each one of us. I cannot guarantee what comes next, but I can say this. If you are reading this account and something inside you vibrated, do not ignore it. Pray, seek, ask. God is not silent, and if He chose someone like me to listen, it is because He wants everyone to listen. This is not a story of death. It is a story of revelation, of awakening, of preparation. And if you've made it this far, perhaps it's because you too have been called to prepare.